This segment of Kashrus Anytime is brought to you by Rabbi Yehuda Shain, the administrator of Kashrus Anytime, which is a division of the Kosher Consumers Union, a 501c3 organization. We'll be bringing to you a number of issues that came up at a shiur in Lakewood Yeshiva regarding chickens, meat, etc. The first question was, is there a Masorah on the chickens that we're using over here in the United States? Because they're crossbred, etc., etc. I explained that I was by Rav Osner approximately 22 years ago to discuss this issue. And I explained to Rav Osner that my grandfather was a sheichet. He shechted these chickens, and this is what he basically, I would say, remembers of what the chickens were in Israel, in Europe. So Rav Osner told me that basically by a chicken, you have to see, does it look like a chicken, does it walk like a chicken, and does it crow like a chicken? And if it has those things, and this is what they've been using for that many years, that in itself makes a Masorah because they've been using it, the Shach have been using it, and you haven't heard anything else, and it has these three criteria. So I asked Rav Osner, so why is it that the Kabir chicken, which was developed by the Katz family in Eretz Yisrael, that the Rav Osner said that it cannot be used? So he said, did you ever see the Kabir chicken? I said, yes, I did. He said, well, the Kabir chicken does not have any feathers on the neck. It doesn't, and it has some feathers go down further down on the legs than normal chickens. And it doesn't really crow the same sound like chickens that we used to. So he asked the Katz family, could you tell me with what birds you crossbred them to know if these are kosher, meaning that have a Masorah to crossbred them? So the Katz family says, well, it's a very big secret. It's a side and we don't want to say. So Rav Osner told me that he answered them that I'll tell you something that's not a side, that these chickens are usher because they don't have the criteria of saying that there's a Masorah on them. Because the Katz family wanted me to help them get it into United States to the base of shchitas and everything. But once I heard that from Rav Osner, I notified them and I notified other Rabbanim, etc., that Rav Osner asked the chickens and it should not be used. And basically I had to sell out the company to a non-kosher company they sold out that wasn't being used. Ultimately, I did find out with what they crossbred it. The main bird they crossbred it with was the turkey. That's why there was no feathers on the neck, and that's why it didn't really sound exactly like it, and the feathers went down further. It had a lot of the criteria of the turkey, and the way it walked was more like an upright type, not like a regular chicken, which is more bent down, more like the turkey standing up. Then came up recently, they asked me about the Tarnagoil, which is a chicken that's being pushed a lot by the Sachtzarabon, by the CRC. I said I don't have yet information. I'm in the middle of doing research on it. I really don't know yet, but I'll advise them as time goes. Then the next question that came up was regarding which is the preferred chicken over here in the United States and why is that preferred chicken, and a few other issues. And I addressed to them at that time why I felt that Birdsboro is really superior to the other ones. And then the question came up, do they give injections in the neck, in the legs, in the eggs? What do they do? Because in Eretz Yisrael, the Ada has instituted that most of the injections should be given in the thigh. The reason they don't want to give it in the loose skin by the neck is they were afraid that it might go into the patient. I've observed how they give those things, and it's a very, very small needle. It's done at an angle. It's usually given at the first, third, and seventh day. And very rare that it could go into the patient, but the Ada had chashis that it can, so they were giving it in the thigh. They found that afterwards that in the thigh it was causing a lot of problems with all different kind of veins and giddin and other things in the chicken were getting really infected, etc., etc., without really noticing it lower down by the time it's a giddin. So I'm not sure exactly how they solved that problem. So we here in America and a lot of the places they're giving the injection in the egg. The egg has two sides, the pointed side and the round side. The round side has in it a membrane underneath with a pocket of air. And as the chick is growing, which is basically 21 days it takes from when it got fertilized till it gets out of the shell and it hatches. So they give the injection. The question is, till what day could you give the injection? The head usually lands up by the part of the egg that's round, and when they put in the couple of the drop or two, whatever else it is, the thing, it works its way into the chick. Now the question is, till what day? Of what I've done some research, I felt very comfortable till the 17th day they could inject the eggs without it having a problem of maybe it'll be nick of klumamoyev that it went into the chick. After talking to the Baron Teitelbaum of the KJ Schieter, he felt nothing wrong based on what his people went to check out. They could give it, I believe it was till the 19th day, and the OU's position is also till the 19th day, and but I believe that Birdsboro is doing it based till the 17th day. They're not going till the 19th day, but if the Rabbanim feel comfortable that way, fine. Then the question came up was that others have noticed on certain brands, not breeds, certain brands of chicken, the skin is extremely, extremely loose. The question is, does the malicha really help because the skin is really not attached to the chicken? The question is, why is that happening? Is it because of the way they grow it, and they grow it that fast, so the skin is that loose, or is it after the salting they leave it soaking too long in the water to chill down and to get out the rest of the salt, and it really gets too waterlogged, and that's causing the thing to separate. But one thing which I was able to assure them, that I've checked many of the Birdsboro chicken, and the skin is on extremely, extremely tight. And I explained to them also in Birdsboro, very rare to find a shoichet that's a Mislamed, a student shoichet. They're all experienced shachtim. Sometimes you have that others came from Etzstrol, which Etzstrol style shchita is considerably different than the American style shchita. In Etzstrol, in general, by the better shchitas, the Eder, Rabbi Reuben, Mesheris, Rav Lando, the shoichet holds the chicken in his hand, and he grabs the chicken with the neck and he makes the shchita. So they make the shchita basically a very, very small and straight cut. And then really most of the time, or rather very often, they're not getting the carotid arteries, they're not really cutting the vriden. In America, on the other hand, in the United States, they're cutting on an angle. It's called a shchita mefaras, which they cut low down and on an angle towards the head, and always, in general, they're cutting the vriden, the carotid arteries. It get cut, and it's a much bigger bleeder. It could be over there in Estrol. The reason they don't do it is if you're shechting on the hand, they don't want to have that much blood running down on the hand. But what happens is, when the toikef agudel to check the simonim in the USA American style shchita, you almost don't have to be toikef agudel. You could see the simonim that they were shechted properly. On the other hand, the Israeli style shchita, you basically have to be toikef agudel very hard and push it through, and many times the opening is very, very small of where you made the cut, and it's very hard to push out the simonim. And as I've observed, after a few minutes, basically the simonim are really not, on a lot of the chickens, they're not really popping out, and they don't really see of what it was over there. But whatever they're doing, so over here, I think the style shchita in the United States is better. So in Birdsboro, when they get a strolled shoichet, it's a whole ASIC of them retraining that shoichet, that over here is style shchita, is a shchita mefaras, and that's the way you should check. It's a question by these young chickens, do you have to pluck the feathers from the neck before shchita or not? Others consider it to be hair, not feathers, because in Allah it says that you should take out the feathers, so there shouldn't be a chalada, etc. The question is, what is this considered? We've seen in some base of shchitas that they'll take out the feathers, the shachtim, every fourth or fifth chicken, but the big problem is taking out the feathers really if you're not shechting over there, you're not just taking out the feathers, could be a shalav a deraisa of tzar balachayim. But because you need it for the shechita, so it's not tzar balachayim. But I've seen that many times where they pluck out the feathers, they're not shechting in that part. So really they were over on tzar balachayim deraisa, and they're shechting in a different part, which is b'chlal a very, very big problem. In some plants, we used to have this big problem of tzomis I get 2-3 years ago. They were checking all the chickens. Now a lot of the plants are down. They check from the in the morning from the first batches that come in from the certain farmers. They'll check 100, 200, maybe up to 300 chickens, and then they watch to see if they see any reyes of something that looks different, the shape of the leg, etc., etc., to know if they may have a problem. Then they'll open it up to check. By Birdsboro, they're still today, they're still checking the tzomis again by every single one of them. Now, Birdsboro is under the hashgacha of Esachtis, but I feel it's not because of Esachtis that it is such a nice shechita. Most probably the nicest shechita that there is in chickens across the world, including at Stroll, because as we see, Marvid in Canada is also on the Hesach Tzarabonim, but it's a very, very poor system over there, etc., etc. So it seems there's a lot that has to do with it, with the management of what they want to set up to come within the guidelines, etc., etc. And in Birdsboro, it seems they have a very, very big push in order to get it that it should be really a beautiful shechita. Then the question is open salted versus closed salted. Splitting open the chicken, split backs, etc. The problem that happens by split backs is that very often the skin becomes loose because it's not solid around the cavity of the chicken, and many areas that the skin got detached from the chicken, but it's still there covering it, but it's not really attached. You're really supposed to pick up that skin and salt underneath it. If not, you have at best milich mitzadechad. That's why I usually prefer to take only close salted chickens because of that. Birdsboro in general is close salted chickens. Then the question boils down also is, are you better off having goyim doing the salting and a mashgiach watching over them or management to make sure it's done right, or to have yidden salting? And I feel that goyim salting is much more superior. As in the plant I found where yidden were doing the salting, and I showed them where certain places weren't salted. They told me, they had all of the other kind of sayings, which basically for goy salting you never hear that. And staying in a cold room, moist, etc., for 8 to 10 hours a day, which a yid is usually not used to that. The second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth hour is nothing as good as his first half hour or hour that he was working over there. So it turns out to be a problem doing it that way. So when I brought it up to the attention of the Rabbi Machshir in one plant, he told me, you want to take away the parnos from yeshiva life? I said, no, they could fix computers, they could fix shoes, they could do other things, but not when it affects kashrut. This is type of salting. If you're doing the salting at home, you're salting 15, 20 chickens, you could have a yid doing it and done everything properly. But when you have this kind of quantity, which we're talking about 30 to 40,000 chickens a day, and that's what they have in the mashgichim, this is not arbet for mashgichim. They could take off the crates and trucks. There's a lot of other things that they could do, but this is basically nishka yiddish arbet, but basically nothing was changed. But in Birdsboro, they do have that the goyim are salting, and they check it. If a goy doesn't do the thing right, basically, they move him off and they put somebody else there. Then the question came up at this shiur, the question came up regarding beef, which basically from what I've seen and I picked up from others that work in the plains over here, I felt that Solomon's beef is really the most superior one in the shechita from all the other ones around over here that we have in the United States. It's by far, far more superior. The regular shechita, the Beis Yosef shechita, etc., etc., with no playing games or anything else like it. And the other shchitas are, we've picked up a number of problems, etc., etc., and what they call Beis Yosef, etc., etc. It was really not that straightforward of what it is. Certain plants wouldn't let me in, I understand because there's problems there. As Moshe Feinstein told me when I used to visit him more often, regarding shchitas and other things, he told me any plant that doesn't let me in, when I do have the full knowledge of what's going on there, you should know that that in itself is a razor. And plants are not, shchita plants are supposed to be open for Barnum and others that do have Smicha in order that they should be able to see it. The Chassam Sofer writes in the Tshuva that by them they had the Chol Yom Yub Gedechel Barnum, that the Besden used to walk in on the Shechita completely unannounced, etc. Other plants insist that they want to have an appointment, they want to have this, they want to have that, which is really not right. Then they brought up they want to know about the local a local store that has a few different branches. They have their own shchita that's done in Baltimore in a company called Truth. That same place you have Star K Shechts there, and Milmar Alley Shechts there. Shem Mendelwitz has a shchita there, I believe, and some others. And they want to know what do I say about it. So I said that basically I usually wouldn't eat from that shechita for a number of reasons. One thing is that the amount of galat and beis yosef that this local purveyor, the one that has these 3 stores over here in town, 4 stores, is much higher the beis yosef and the galat than the other 3, 4 different shechitas. Number one. Number two, I asked the balabas how many grinding machines he has. So he says he has one. I say you sell a lot of Beis Yosef meat. If you run out of chop meat in the middle of the day, could you tell me what your procedure is? He says we wipe down the machine and we grind and we have Beis Yosef meat. So I told him, but you realize that the inside of the machine is still full of meat. He says yes. I say which to a Sfardi, that is actually treif because it's not Beis Yosef. So if you have no problem giving a Sfardi treif, why would I differentiate and say that Ashkenazi you wouldn't give treif? So he thinks a moment, and then he says, by the way, all of my meat is Beis Yosef. I said, oh boy, Beis Yosef never would have thought of that. So I said, you mean to tell me if you have regular meat marked as regular glut, and you see you're running out of it, and your shechita is first coming in 2, 3 days around, and you need some more Beis Yosef meat, you have no problem putting on labels on it. So I say, so I can't trust you not in Choshen Mishpat and not in Yeridea. And you asking me why I tell people not to take from the Shechita? I'm very surprised in you that that's your attitude. Other things I will discuss at the Shiur will bring up another time. In the meantime, Kol Tov and Be Matzliach. Thank you.